welcome to episode 293 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 18th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. I'm so grateful to Capstone for their commitment to support the podcast in Season 7. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, Administrators as Allies, and my conversation with Sean Gailliard and Dr. Andrea Trudeau. So excited. Dr. Trudeau, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Amy. It's so good to be back, and it's pretty exciting to be here as the doctor.
Well, and we've been friends ever since our very first episode. We recorded exactly 4 years ago, and we've always had great opportunities to connect over episodes and conferences. I could not have imagined 4 years ago that we would be doing this together. And you're a really important part of my life. Oh, I'm going to get emotional.
I mean, when you go to Wiener Circle together in Chicago, you're forever bonded. That's it.
And, trust your friends. When your friends say, I've got this great place we're going to go out, just trust. Always trust your friends and trust school librarians. They're never going to lead you astray. Congratulations, you have your PhD. This is incredibly exciting.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's still pretty surreal, but I defended in May, and I will be walking in my graduation in December. So it's pretty awesome.
I remember streaming that I've never seen somebody defend their dissertation, and I got to absolutely watch you in real time, which was incredibly distracting because I was supposed to be working also. But friends, I did want to mention also Andrea's, the links to Andrea's episodes are in the show notes. Episode 94, Virtual Burnout and Self-Care, one of our very important pandemic episodes. Episode 202, you were one of many school librarians who chimed in for Renovations, experts chime in. And then finally, this has a lot to do with that doctorate that you now have, VR and building empathy. And that was episode 236. So listeners can hear all about your expertise from your conversations.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here and to chat with you, Amy.
Well, you know what? Let us know where you are in the country. For those of us who have not heard your past episodes, tell us about your current library and, give us an idea of what your day-to-day is like.
Okay, great. I'm Andrea Trudeau, and I work in a public middle school just north of Chicago in Deerfield, District 109. This is my 27th year in the school. Most of those years were spent in the classroom, but this is my 10th year doing the most incredible job ever, which is to be the library information specialist in our learning commons. So it's a very human-centered space. It's very student-focused. I like to think of it as a learning playground where we take risks and we try new things, and it's a culture of yes. And I get to play and partner with people and build community all day long. It's truly a gift to do the work that I do.
Fantastic. I want to credit you with the inspiration for today's episode. I literally did nothing, friends. It was sort of gift wrapped. Andrea had this fantastic idea, administrators as allies. So please tell us how you came to meet our second guest, Sean Gailliard.
So Sean is an incredible educational leader. I stumbled upon his work on Twitter and read his book, The Pepper Effect, and have just been in awe of just his vibe on Twitter. He's one of the kindest, most human-centered people. He's so willing to share. He's so good-hearted. I wish everybody had a principal like Sean in their school. So it's been such an honor to connect with him most recently in the last few months and to have him here today.
So, friends, we are making one very rare exception to the rule of always featuring and showcasing school librarians on the show. Sean is indeed an administrator, and it is very important to this conversation that we bring somebody in with his expertise. Sean Gailliard, welcome to the podcast.
Amy, thank you so much for having me on. And Andrea, the check is in the mail. Thank you for all of those kind words that you have shared and extolled. I tell you, Amy, anytime you hang out with Dr. Trudeau, do you not feel like you are? We were talking about Fleetwood Mac earlier, and I'm not going to put myself in the category of Lindsey Buckingham in this case, but something about Stevie Nicks and Andrea Trudeau, it's like they bring out the best in others. And I always felt that Andrea, kind of like how Stevie Nicks would always bring out the best in Lindsey Buckingham or Christine McVie or other, and of course Mick Fleetwood and John McVie. I just kind of feel that same vibe. So I'm very grateful to be here and Amy also to kind of break the cardinal rule of being an undercover administrator. I feel like I need to be shrouded in when you have the witness.
We're gonna blur your voice, your image. Yes, no. Honestly, I think what has been most important to me is that we always center school librarians in the conversation. And I think we're still sticking true to that, but it's vitally important that we bring in an administrator like yourself. I do want to emphasize your expertise as an administrator. Could you just back us up? Because you have been an administrator in a variety of settings over quite a few years. So could you give us a little bit of sort of, in terms of your depth of expertise as an administrator?
Sure, I'm happy to do so, and I'll try to cut to the chase. So I often introduce myself, professionally. I'll say I'm in education, and then I'll say by trade, I'm a high school English teacher, and that's how I've always kind of perceived myself as such. And I'm a high school English teacher who is married to a teacher who used to be a school librarian. And yes, and I've spent many a time, and I've shared this with Andrea, many a time in a library, in the bookmobile and things. And I've spent many a time being thrown out of school librarians when I was a student, which ended me up invariably in the principal's office. And so I spent so much time in the principal's office that I believe that I got some on-the-job training that led me to this kind of trajectory of being, I guess, what you would deem as a turnaround school principal. I go in for a certain amount of time, sometimes as the last line of defense. I proudly and actively have served and taught in Title I schools, and really my job is to help the school and help the kids get back to where they can be, and it's very aspirational work. So I've been an educator on every level of K-12, and I've been an administrator on every level of K-12 in the last, I don't know, I guess 5-7 years or so. I've been in elementary world as principal. So wouldn't trade any of it for the world. I am always at home in a school library. And actually, I have followed Andrea's work for quite some time, and I've always been fascinated by how I kind of view the library as being the community hub and being the classroom for the school. It's the center. And so I'm fascinated by Andrea's work in terms of building a sense of belonging in her learning space and just how she frames things. So that's what's kind of attracted me to her work, because I've always seen the library as being something more than what it is stereotypically viewed as or perceived as. And again, nothing wrong with card catalogs and Dewey Decimal Systems and the like, but I just feel like the library is this kind of emblem or mirror for what the school is, and it's the hub, the nucleus, all those things. Plus, I'm a book geek, so I will often hide in the library on purpose, because like Andrea's library, that's where all the stuff goes down. That's where everybody goes. That's where you find out, where all the bodies are buried. That's where you find out, what makes kids tick, what makes teachers tick. So I very much value this space and being a part of this time with you both. So I'm very grateful.
Well, Andrea is one of my heroes. I do always look up to Andrea and the things that she is able to accomplish. And I think that it goes without saying that we are... so much of what we aspire to do in our spaces is going to be very much impacted by just how much support we are getting from the administrators who oversee us. And one of the reasons why Andrea is a great asset in this conversation is because she has this fantastic program, and it is very much a product of not only her incredible and aspirational work that she's done with her students, but also, I'm sure to a certain extent, the fact that there's a supportive administrator who has made sure that she has had the kind of financial support and just, when I just say support, as in, I will back you up if there's something you want to try that's new, because oftentimes we want to do things that require us to change how the school functions. And I'm talking about something as basic as like lunch. What are our lunchroom protocols? Are students able to access the library at times that perhaps are not during the classroom time, but, things like before school and after school? And those are the kinds of things that are very much, the purview of the administrators. So Andrea brings with us to this conversation a great deal of expertise. Sean, I want to also mention, because you are a fellow podcaster, I think listeners would appreciate your expertise in this particular conversation when we consider that who you primarily interview on your show.
Yeah, I do talk to a lot of principals. The name of the podcast is the Principal Liner Notes Podcast, which is kind of wrapping up its shelf life. I've decided to kind of press pause on it. In fact, Andrea was actually instrumental, not in me stopping it, but actually kind of part of the behind the scenes decision in that. But I'm very lucky for 8 seasons that I have, interviewed all kinds of different levels of administrator, be it a superintendent or principal or assistant principal or aspiring leader. Probably though, my most, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this, but I do have a favorite guest on the show who is not a principal and is not a school librarian. That was my daughter. So I had to kind of put that plug in there. So.
Well, and I will just say, even if you are not currently recording moving forward, the repository of conversations which you do have available are incredibly valuable to anybody who is considering moving into administration and getting a real authentic understanding of what it's like to be a principal at a school. And you've interviewed across different grade levels. So I think it's such a valuable and very intimate way to understand and appreciate all the the aspects of a job that perhaps somebody's interested in trying out. So let's go ahead and before we get started, I do want to mention, friends, we're always going to try and keep this conversation positive. I don't want to sort of gloss over the fact that, some of us do struggle. Some of us have had, experiences with administrators that haven't always been positive. I have probably moved around more than most. And I've switched districts several times as a school librarian. And I'm not going to lie, it is because of the administrators I worked with. My first experience in my library was when my library program was eliminated. And it was eliminated because the administrators in my district decided to go a different way. It really does give one pause. And when your job is eliminated, you realize that you have to sort of land on your feet. And so you do have to recognize that we don't always have these amazing, experiences. But I do want to keep this positive and upbeat because we have to all learn how to navigate our school, dynamic and getting along with our administrators. They really can be incredibly enabling and supportive. We just have to make sure that we find the right approach. I did want to just mention, when I've switched jobs, it's because my job has disappeared or because my job has become untenable. And the decision to leave was one I made because I deserve better. So I'm just going to say that out loud.
I'm glad you did because, it kind of echoes a little bit of my friend Todd Whitaker, who's like my edu Beatles. And I've heard this, and I don't know if it's attributed to him, but I've heard this in various leadership circles from various administrators in that, people don't leave buildings, they leave people. And that's something that's always kind of been in the foreground of the trajectory of my leadership is making sure that I'm doing what I can, to build a culture and or to help build a culture. It's not all me, but I think that's very powerful. What you just said, and I appreciate you sharing that. There are a lot of school librarians right now, who are, and again, I don't know all of the details. You all know, and your listeners know this better than me. That are dealing with some very, very sharp things right now that aren't pleasant. Whether it's budget, whether it's the community, whether it's a school board, whether it's a superintendent, whether it's a principal, and it is incumbent upon leadership in some way, shape, or form to take care of the people we serve. We talk about as leaders, kids, we're very kid-centered and human-centered, but in order to do that, you got to make sure that you're taking care of the people that are in the front lines. So on the flip side of that, there are school leaders who, and I think, Amy, you echoed this, and thank you for the warm things you've said about my podcast, is that there are many school leaders who are very isolated, who are very lonely, who are dealing with imposter syndrome, who are dealing with things, and they're looking for a place to land. They're looking for a place to connect, and I think that's kind of what brought Andrea and our work together, and in that, most buildings, there's one principal and one school librarian. Why not get together and form a band? Why not together and find some common ground and do something really cool for the humans in your building? So, but it's. Yeah, I value what you just shared. I know it's not easy.
Well, I want to bring Andrea into this conversation because Andrea has this amazing perspective on a relationship that, in my experience, has oftentimes felt imbalanced. I always felt that I really had very little control in the situation that I had been in. And I think that Andrea, when we were talking about this a little bit leading up to this conversation, Andrea's understanding of how power plays in the relationship between an administrator and a school librarian can be viewed very differently.
Yeah. So in my 10 years as a librarian, I was just sort of reflecting. I've worked now with 3 principals, all very different human beings. And kind of like Sean was just mentioning, I think a lot of it has to do with building those relationships first. That's the heart of so much of what we do as educators, librarians, administrators. You have to have those relationships first and build that trust to then go and do the next thing. And sometimes that involves like a hard conversation. I have been really leaning into this work that I learned about when I was teaching overseas in East Africa, which is Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And the gist of it is that we really need to try to lead with curiosity, like replace judgment with curiosity. I think sometimes when something happens to our library programs, it's like, I know I get immediately sort of inflamed because it's like, this is my baby. I've created this. Now you're infringing upon it. How dare you? And so it's taking that moment to pause and to calm myself and then to go and ask the right questions and to have a productive conversation. Because I have found, and I don't know if you feel this way, Amy and Sean, but like librarians are like the Wizard of Oz. We're kind of working behind the scenes and not everybody knows all the work that we're doing and the intricacies of our work. So a tiny little suggestion or change can completely derail some things we've been doing and are proud of. And it's difficult. I mean, I just had this conversation last week with some admin in my building where I had to call out something that was happening, and different administrators handled it differently. One not so great, the others were better, and it was a great way for me to practice nonviolent communication, which is leading with curiosity, focusing on communication. It's the notion of power with rather than power over. So we're like working shoulder to shoulder to support each other, because at the end of the day, we're all here to do the same thing. We're all here to create this amazing school that supports our students and staff in the spirit of learning. We all want to build community. We all want to like going to work every day. And I want my principal to be successful. And I want him to want me to be successful. So I'm going to do what it takes to help him be his best self. And I hope he will do the same for me. And I think as a librarian, I work in a space that's like Cheers. Everybody comes in, they belly up to my circ desk, the Genius Bar, they spill their stories, and you get like the finger on the pulse. So I'm able to go to my principal and be like, all right, here's the skinny. And like, I do this so that he has a sense of what's happening so that he can go make the situation better or just know what's happening. I'm not going to go ratting out my colleagues or anything like that, but just things that he needs to know so that he can be successful as a principal. So that nonviolent communication, I will make sure you have a link. That book is life-changing. It would help me as just a human. It doesn't even have to be based on being an educator. It helps you communicate with everybody around you.
So I know, Andrea, I'm going to put a link in the show notes, and I'm very excited to take a look at this book because when I think nonviolent communication, I'm trying to understand how my communicating with an administrator might be perceived as perhaps aggressive and maybe overly passionate because I feel so deeply about the program I'm trying to build.
And I don't think it's wrong to be passionate. I mean, I've said to administrators several times that if I suddenly don't come to you and don't seem to care, you've lost me and you better be worried. Like, I am still going to be a fierce advocate of my library, but I'm always going to try to approach it in a way where it's like, we have to be working together towards this. I'm not going to go bulldozing in any way or taking people down. It's like, okay, how can we meet in the middle? How can I show them that, I need to hear kind of what they value and what their vision is and what their wants are and how I can, work towards that as well. Because like I said, in the end, we all really do want the same things. We just see it from our own little corner of the educational space.
So, Sean, I have to ask, as a school librarian, I've always had this sense that when I go to my administrator, I come with certain baggage that other educators don't. Number one, I'm going to be asking for money. Number two, everything I do impacts everybody in the building. And I'm not being grandiose. I'm just stating a fact that school librarians, we can impact every grade level, every core subject, every student, every teacher, so that when we come and ask you for things, oftentimes we come with the potential to impact every single student in our school community writ large.
Yeah, it's, I've been in that realm on both levels as an educator and as a principal. So, and as a student, I remember, being frustrated that there weren't enough books on the Beatles in the library as a kid, or I was fighting over, at the time, S.E. Hinton, growing up in the 80s was the author, and there was only one copy of Rumblefish. And I literally remember running down the hallway because I knew we were watching, whoever it was finish the book, and so from those level of frustrations, I get that. I also get that as an English teacher, the same thing, just in terms of the limitations. So I've learned that, and then probably on from a principal level, I mean, the school is a reflection of you, the principal, and so you want to make sure that what is being represented in the school, what is happening in the school, is not only a positive reflection on teachers and kids, but ultimately it's your show. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. So, there are times where I will say, and again, I want to read Andrea's book on nonviolent communication. So kind of another book that has helped me when it comes to critical conversation is a book called Crucial Conversations. And it's really kind of the same thing. If we may disagree, but there's got to be some common ground that we're walking on. So I always try to frame things because I know it can be intimidating, because I was intimidated as a department chair for English asking for this, or even as a principal if I'm advocating for something to a superintendent. So I operate under the mindset that it's my job as principal to remove as many barriers as possible so that the folks who've got whatever gig, whatever job in the schoolhouse can be effective. So yes, that will reflect on students and impact student achievement, whatever you want to call it, student achievement, literacy, whatever good result that's out there. But let's be real to those principals that hopefully are listening, and for those school librarians who are struggling with their principal. That library collection whatever's happened in that library reflects back on that principal. School libraries, to me, they're like kittens and babies. Like they're just kind of people have a certain nostalgic feel and a certain perception about libraries. Parents, board members, community members, whoever's coming in. Remember, I talked about waxing nostalgically about how the library is this kind of nucleus, and I can see Socrates, sitting someplace, doing dialectics, but ultimately, do I as principal want a crappy library with antiquated books and antiquated resources, or do I want a library that folks are going to feel like, okay, this is where learning's happening. Man, not only do they have the hip new, scholastic author collection, but they also are doing some things that are differently. Let's also keep this in mind as well, that parents and communities have choices, and they may decide, you know what, I'm not feeling it, based upon what's happening in the schoolhouse or the library. So I'm going to go down the street. I'm going to get a voucher. I'm going to go wherever. I mean, that library it's one of the first things, if not the first thing, that you see when you walk into the schoolhouse, depending on the design of the building. What school tour avoids a library? None.
Well, and I know most Board of Education meetings, I don't know about you, Andrea, but we house every meeting. If it's the PTO, they meet in the library. If it's the Board of Education, they meet in the library. If we have an open house, it happens in the libraries. No, we absolutely showcase. I'm very aware whenever I've gone into a building, you can tell where the spending priorities are. And those spending priorities have to be approved by the central administration and the building administration. Let's start to focus on the, having that positive and supportive relationship with our administrators. Have you, and I know that you have navigated these waters very successfully with your administrators over the years. What are some things that you feel have been most helpful in fostering this positive relationship with your administrators?
I think for each one, it's just about valuing and noticing those small interactions. I feel like little things are really big things. So taking the time to pop in and say hello, to what did you do this weekend? Just the little niceties, just to kind of get an idea of who is this person and what are they interested in. And then obviously as over time, the relationship grows. But I make a concerted effort to get to the office every day, chat with the office staff, say hi to my principal, how was your weekend? But then I'm also like, hey, come on in, guess what we're doing today? And there's a lot of times where he's like, I'm busy, I've got meetings, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, then it's my chance to be like, we're doing this really cool thing in our library and I'm proud of it and I would like you to come see it. So it's that those little pieces of advocacy that are huge. I also just make sure that he knows what's happening. So at our school, we have a weekly newsletter that our principal puts out. I make a point of every week sending him pictures. Check this out, author visit. I just did augmented reality last week. My kids were holding ancient Egyptian objects in their hands. Check it out. Anything that we're doing, I'm showcasing it because he then sees it and then he's also putting it in his newsletter and then it elevates it for my school community as well. So then I've got parents who come up to me at open house and now know who I am and know what I'm doing. So it's like opening the curtain to the Wizard of Oz, like everyone can see what we're doing. So I think it's just, it's really that advocacy piece. And then as time goes on, then I think it's once you've built that strong relationship and you've built that trust, that's when you can have the more difficult conversations. That's when I'm not afraid to say, hey, I'd really like to go to this conference. Will you please support this? And it's going to cost X amount of dollars. Or, hey, I need an increase to my budget because we're doing X, Y, and Z. I've been very fortunate because each of my three principals are very different personalities. I think it's about just being in tune with who they are and kind of meeting them where they're at and not being afraid to be vulnerable.
Well, and something that really stands out when you talk about these strategies is they're unsolicited. And you're not waiting for your principal to come to you, that you are offering up examples of the things that you're doing and basically gift wrapping some of that newsletter that now your principal all of a sudden isn't left scratching their head going, I wonder what I'm going to put in the newsletter for families. Oh, wait a minute. I have some great photos of things that we can showcase here from your learning commons. I love that the first time you talk to your principal isn't that you want money. The first time you talk to your principal is you want to talk about your weekend or the fun things that are on your calendar and family things. But I think if we wait and only talk to our principals when things are going badly or we have a problem, all of a sudden they see us as just that, the person who comes to them with problems. So we have to sort of create a more rounded relationship in one that encapsulates not just the, hey, I'm going to a conference, would you mind funding it? But also, oh, by the way, here are some amazing things that I'm doing in our space. And obviously the families are going to really be pleased when they see all the amazing things we do in our space.
And kind of to like piggyback what you just said about the negative, I also make a point of writing letters, like cards to my principals and my colleagues, just saying, I'm so grateful for XYZ. I saw how you led with empathy in this meeting. Thank you for taking a human-centered approach, because I don't think we hear positive feedback enough. And I think especially our leadership, that's a lonely gig. And I think it's a thankless gig and it's a hard gig. And people often just come to them when they're complaining. So for somebody to get a note saying like, I see you and I see what awesome things you're doing and I'm so grateful for you, that goes a long way too. Because now the joke is my principal doesn't want me ever to retire and I don't want him to leave until I retire. So it's amazing. And he's been with me for 2 months. Like we've already built such a solid bond in 2 months.
So friends, I'm just a little pro tip, because we all have those workrooms that are sort of like time capsules and you have all these boxes in your workrooms. Go through and find those cards, that we used to stamp that go in the books. All right. When Andrea talks about writing a card to your administrator, I use those little book pockets and the cards as my stationery. And I'll tell you what, it gets the biggest giggle because my love language are flowers. So when my last principal was hired, I walked in with a potted plant. It had been a bouquet of flowers for the principal prior. And I tried to see what would be most appreciated in their office. And as I mentioned last summer, that I had to go find a potted plant because my principal had a lovely window and you need a potted plant. So, no, absolutely excellent strategies. So, Sean, asking you, you're the administrator. What has worked for you when you think back on relationships that you feel have really been supportive, and especially, if you can share any sort of encounters that you have had with your librarians, what has been the best way to approach issues that you all need to discuss?
Well, I think it's really the same as Andrea shared. We as principals don't want our interaction to always be negative. We, sometimes we are in the business of saying no or no and or not yet. So I try to operate under the auspices, if you will, of really leaning into non-bureaucratic events, non-meeting type things. I do avoid the office as much as possible. So I think having those kinds of interactions, before school, after school, during school. Hey, how's your family doing? Hey, Dr. Trudeau, you're now a doctor. Well, man, when's that dissertation coming out? Amy, I was at the greenhouse the other day, and I saw a bunch of azaleas that I think you would love. So I try to drop those kind of little things along the way, because people sometimes view principals as being Darth Vader or the Grim Reaper or some sort of, draconian evil overlord. So I fight that stereotype as much as possible. But I also find too, and I remember this as a high school English teacher, that, the more that I would collaborate with the school librarian, the staff or what have you, the better it was for the kids I was serving. And so I still do that, so whether it is, hey, can I do story time? Hey, can I take over? Hey, can we do something together? Hey, like the other day I was sitting down with our school librarian and, I said, listen, I just need some time with you. I need us to have some time together, and let's plot a conspiracy of hope and love for kids or something. So I think you have to be active in those realms and finding those ways that you as the principal can collaborate. And it could be something simple as low-hanging fruit as, hey, could you post my favorite book in the school library, and maybe I'll do a special read aloud, something like that, or a staff picks or a principal picks. I think the other thing too for principals who are listening to remember this, and y'all mentioned this, the space is very important, and you as the principal have to really protect that space. The school library is the school librarian's classroom. It's their workspace. So, I remember hearing this from my wife when she was a school librarian, how the board would never put the chairs back, and it drove her crazy. Or they didn't put the tables back the right way, or they'd leave their coffee cups. So I am very cognizant of that when we use that space. And I will say to faculty, hey friends, this is Dr. Trudeau's library. This is Ms. Herman's library. So this is their classroom too. So let's just push the chairs in. It won't take too long, or something along those lines. But finding a project, finding something to collaborate on, I think is very important. And that's what served me well, whether it's a goofy prize for the book fair, whether it's a scavenger hunt, just kind of those easy, fun things, which then lead to a little bit of discovery. Oh, wow, I didn't know your nonfiction collection hasn't been updated since 1989. What? Who paid for this? Well, you did. Oh my God, we got to figure that out. It's those kinds of things that if you can lean in and I would say to school librarians, if you can, and I would hope that you are in some level of psychological safety. But don't wait for the principal to do that. Most principals, I'm just going to tell you, aren't like me. And they're focused on other things, or they're under some other level of pressure, where that the school library, as long as the lights are on and the books are getting shelved, that's all they care about. And or there may be that perception that's all they care about, but they don't have the time to come into your space. So invite them in some way, shape, or form. And I'll tell you, if that invitation is denied, then call me, and I owe you a cup of coffee. But I just can't think of any school leader allowing themselves to be disinvited or to deny that kind of overture. So I would just encourage school librarians to do that, just as I'm encouraging school principals to go in and visit your school library and get involved in some sort of conspiracy of love and hope with your school librarian.
Well, I am going to say that I was an elementary librarian for 14 years, and my best, the administrators I respected the most were the ones who were willing to subject themselves to a little humiliation in order to be part of building that excitement for reading. When there were reading goals, the principal that allowed themselves to be duct taped to the wall, or the principal who spent the night on the roof of the school, or the school principal who became the human Sunday, all would have gone over incredibly well with our students. Yes, when the principal has to do X or Y, when the students reach that many minutes of or how many books they've read this year, I have been very grateful to my administrators who are always willing to put themselves in harm's way to be the reason why students are excited because their principal is going to be made into a human Sunday. And friends, that involves a shower curtain and a folding chair, and then pouring all sorts of ice cream toppings, whipped cream over the head of your principal. It is fantastic. And the children scream and applaud, and it is a great deal of fun and unforgettable. Andrea, I want to see if you and I can go through some of these things that I think make a big difference in building this trusting relationship with our administrators. Some things that have really made a difference in my ability to build a successful and respectful relationship with my administrators. One of them is having regularly scheduled meetings on our calendar. And I'd like to speak a little bit about that because when I had a principal who said, it is really important that you and I meet regularly, let's put something on the calendar. We may have to be flexible sometimes, but I always want to know that we have a scheduled meeting on the calendar. To me, that spoke volumes of my administrator, and I really respected them because they valued and said, even without knowing you, Amy, I know that you and I are going to need to talk on a regular basis. So I'm hoping that you two could sort of chime in if you've experienced that level of mutual respect.
So I haven't had the regularly scheduled meetings per se, but my previous principal, he would check in with me every single day. He would pop in, and it was our chance to share music that we both loved and talk about what was going on. And then if there was something that warranted a longer conversation, because it was really just a flyby, he was just kind of buzzing around the building and he wanted to just sort of check in for the day and chat with me, then we would kind of follow up. I hope to get to that point with my new principal. He's about 2 months in and I think still finding his footing. We do talk nearly daily, but I don't see him daily per se. It might just be by email. So I love that idea because I think it shows that you're making each other a priority and you're making, your library a priority. And so I think that's really important.
I think what that says to me is that principal in particular regularly took a walk and was seen by the students and the staff outside of the main office of the school. And I think that is going to always pay off. And those dividends, when administrators get out of the office and are walking the halls and they're seen making their rounds, it's really important. What do you think, Sean?
I agree. Visibility is key on a lot of different levels. It builds trust, it builds communication, it builds rapport, and then it also builds discovery for the principal, for the good and bad that may be happening in that schoolhouse. So I've never had like a regular scheduled meeting, very similar to Andrea's previous principal, where I would pop in, and then if it required something longer, we would schedule something. But I think that's key. Pete, you are the CEO of that building, right or wrong, and people want to see their leaders in action, engaged, and getting in, as my great friend Lauren Kaufman says, in the mess of learning. And what better way to do that than to stop in the school library, and to build that connection and to build that rapport. And again, going back to Andrea's earlier word choice on ally, a principal needs a thought partner. Everybody needs a thought partner, whether you're a principal or not, or school librarian. Everyone needs a thought partner. Everyone needs a bandmate. Everyone needs someone to not only commiserate with, but to share ideas and to share dreams and to solve problems together. And so I think this relationship, which is unspoken, between principal and school librarian, I think that's where Andrea and I are excited to kind of explore that, to maybe build some structures and to give some tips and to help folks find some intersections, some healthy intersections and productive intersections where those two seemingly disparate roles connect. Because I think there's a lot more in common than principals and school librarians may not necessarily or readily find or discover. So that's where we feel that we can be of some help and some service. And if anything, if it creates one conversation about between a principal and a school librarian about some episode of Breaking Bad, or the bear or something. Hey, we've done our job, but we hope it becomes much more than that too.
Something that came up when I recorded an episode, we recorded several episodes on advocacy, is if you want to be valued in the building, start solving other people's problems, and taking on the priorities of your administration and somehow finding ways to show that kind of support in the Learning Commons or the library. That is one way to really endear yourself to the administrators, because you have taken on one of their challenges or one of their problems and found how our space can lend itself to solving some of those challenges. Andrea, can you think of a time when your space has supported like your building goals and really made it possible for your principal to point to your space and say, see, we're doing a good job?
Yeah, so something that we look at each year is our panorama data. So that's like the social emotional learning of our students. And I think that is, to me, the most important goal, because I want students to feel safe and welcome and valued and respected in our school. And the areas that I tend to look at a lot are, and I was actually just looking at this today for this year, was there's questions for students about, do you feel like you have an adult that you can go to in the building, that you feel like you're supported? Do you have your person? And do you feel like there are friends that you have? And I literally scour that and I look for the kids that answer no. And it breaks my heart. But then I'm thinking, okay, I got to get them in, because we are open before school. We are open during lunch. And lunch is so overwhelming for kids. So to say to a kid, okay, you have to eat your lunch in the lunchroom, but here's a pass. And then for the last 20, come hang with me. And I have kids now that belly up to my circ desk and want to hang and chat. And we talk about all kinds of stuff, where they're doing Rubik's Cubes, mosaics, or they're singing in the corner, or they're playing board games. And suddenly they're making a friend. So I think when we look at all this data, because everything is so data driven, and I understand that's our reality, the librarian is in this incredible position to connect with kids every single day and to work with all of the teachers and all of the students, and I think have a profound impact. So yeah, I think we're a really critical piece for meeting those goals.
So Sean, I'm so fascinated. You talk to administrators all the time on your podcast, and you have a breadth of experience yourself, a life of experience that so many people can learn from. Imagine you're in a room full of rookie administrators. They're going to be walking into their very first principalship of their careers, and you want them to get off on the right foot when it comes to building that relationship with their school librarians. What kind of advice would you impart on this room full of rookie administrators? Because, as you know, there are so many things that you say and do that can make this an incredibly rewarding relationship.
There are very few spaces in the schoolhouse where just about every student, teacher, paraprofessional, parent, caregiver walk through. And that school library is it a reflection? Is it a living representation or reflection of the school vision and mission? Does it scream a sense of belonging and safety? Is it an extension of your leadership core? And the only way that you're going to learn that and figure that out is by being visible and asking questions in a proactive way in conspiracy with your school librarian. That person is your co-conspirator for good things. That person is your thought partner, because the job's lonely as hell. I'm just going to tell you straight up. The job is incredibly lonely. That's part of the reason why I did the podcast, because I wanted to talk to other people. I was lonely, and so you've got to find pockets that are going to fill your soul, and what better way than with another singleton in the building that is the Lone Ranger in their role. I don't know of any school that's got multiple librarians.
They're few and far between. That's true.
They got a heck of a budget, or what have you, or a heck of a collection. So I would say that place needs to be in your daily routine, in your daily walk as much as possible. Because if you're lucky, then you'll find your equivalent of Amy or your of Andrea, who will support you and who will help you be successful and help you be better and connect you. So why not?
Andrea, you and I talk often, and it's wonderful that you were able to join us again. It's such a treat. But, I always learn so much from you because you've had such an amazing opportunity to showcase the amazing things that you do in your space, and you've had such a rewarding and successful experience working in your school. When you talk to other school librarians who sometimes feel the struggle and want to have a successful relationship with their administrator, tell us, what do you feel is it that really does make this possible and has been in large part responsible for the amazing relationship that you've had?
I think it's just very important, going back to something I said earlier, to lead with curiosity. So asking questions and really listening to better understand who is this administrator, what makes them tick, what are their interests and motivations, what's their leadership style. And just like we do with our students and our colleagues, we have to meet them where they're at. And I think it's important for us as school librarians to recognize that we are school leaders as well. Our leadership just looks different. While, Sean is this incredible principal overseeing the school, we are too, but in a different way. And so together we can be amazing. And I think, it's unfortunate that I think back early in my career, and there was a lot of talk in our union about, us versus them, the dark side of administration. And I've been really fortunate to I try to find the good in people. I try to find the good in my principals and connect with them and build these strong relationships, because I truly believe, and Amy, I know this is your phrase, we are better together. We have to work together. And there are times that I've built a strong enough relationship that I can go to my principal and say, okay, I need you to have my back, because now I got to go to district admin and I need you to flex your principal muscles for me. I'll go to the mat too, but I need you here in my corner, just like I'm in your corner all day doing all these things for everybody around this building. So it can really be a beautiful partnership, but it has to start small, and it has to start with questions and listening, and you have to be patient, and you have to let it grow, and you have to just see where it takes you.
Fantastic. Sean, I'm hoping you will share with us, if listeners want to follow you on social media, what is your preferred platform? I noticed you have a Linktree. We'll be sure to include that in the show notes. And I also want to include a link to your podcast, because we do have individuals who are not just school librarians, but also exploring other avenues, and educational leadership is one of them. But how can we find you on social media?
Sure. Thanks, Amy. Pretty much the preferred ways are X and Instagram at smgaillard. And I'm also on LinkedIn as well under Sean Gailliard, or my Linktree has links to all of the podcasts and past and present and future podcast projects.
Fantastic. And Dr. Trudeau, where can we find you on social media?
So your best place to find me is on, I still can't call it X, Twitter. And I'm, sorry, Twitter forever. I'm at Andrea_Trudeau. I also have a website. You can visit me at noshushlibrarian.com, so you can kind of see what I've been up to and what project I'm working on now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, friends. Thank you. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week.
Thank you. You too, Amy. Sean, it was so great to connect with you.
Andrea, always a pleasure. Amy, thanks for having us both on. Very grateful.
I'm so grateful to Sean and Andrea for today's conversation. Don't miss the resources in our show notes today, including links to Sean's blog post, Belonging in the Library, and the episode featuring Dr. Trudeau on his show, the Principal Liner Notes podcast. Check out Andrea's resources, including links to her blog, 3 past episodes on this podcast, and the 2 book titles mentioned in today's conversation. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more. See the link in today's show notes. Be sure to tune in on Friday, November 1st for episode 294. The topic of our next episode will be The Lazy Librarian's Guide to Creating Reading Culture and my conversation with Hannah Webster. I hope you will tune in.